Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue with the wonderful book, Mysterious Monsters, Fact or Fiction. This one once again delving into chapter 1, and we're dealing with the final part associated with that very long chapter. It's a long chapter, but essentially it's a lot of mini chapters linked to it. This one though has to do with a fan favorite. It's a cryptid that I've chronicled in the past. I still see comments on it every now and then too. So even to this day, even though I did this video years back, people are still catching it. And then they're posting some interesting thoughts on it. But it has to do with the Dover Demon. That's right, one of the most beloved cryptids that are out there here in the United States. So without further ado, let's start this new segment. Again, this will wrap up this chapter, and the segment is titled, The Dover Demon is an Unsolved Mystery. Wow, pretty interesting stuff already, right? So I'm going to start talking about this and then give my own thoughts and opinions. Let me know what yours are as well. So here's what it states. Just about every area of the world has its own mysterious monster stories. In Dover, Massachusetts, a puzzling creature was reported during one brief period, but the Dover Demon had become part of the permanent lore of that area. According to cryptozoologist Loren Coleman, 1977 was an unusually eventful year for strange occurrences. UFO and creature sightings were abnormally frequent and often seemed to be connected. They often occurred in closely related times and places. Many of the creature sightings involved mysterious monsters with human-like forms. People wondered if some of these creatures were from outer space. When Coleman heard reports of a mysterious monster sighted near Dover in April of that year, he went to investigate. The following selection describes what the witnesses saw and how Coleman investigated. The selection is taken from Creatures of the Outer Edge by Coleman and Jerome Clark. Both men have spent many years investigating paranormal events and have written numerous books and articles about such topics. Their most recent collaboration is Cryptozoology A to Z, an encyclopedia of mysterious monsters and related topics. Coleman is a professor at the University of Southern Maine, author of Bigfoot Across America and other books, and operates a website, The Cryptozoologist, www.lorencoleman.com. Clark is the author of several books, including Unexplained, Strange Sightings, Incredible Occurrences, and Puzzling Physical Phenomenon, and is the editor of International UFO Reporter, published by the Center for UFO Research. So here's what they state. Dover, the wealthiest town in Massachusetts, is 15 miles southwest of Boston. Although it is heavily wooded and its houses are spaced several hundred feet apart, it is hardly a place in which one would expect to encounter a strange creature unknown to science, but that's exactly what 4 teenagers claimed they saw over a 25-and-a-half-hour period in April 1977. Then the next segment is called Eyes Like Orange Marbles. The bizarre affair began at 10:30 on the evening of April 21st as 3 17-year-olds, Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazzocoa, and Andy Brody, were driving north on Dover's Farm Street. Bartlett, who was behind the wheel, spotted something creeping along a low wall of loose stones on the left side of the road. At first, he thought it was a dog or a cat until his headlights hit the thing directly, and Bartlett realized it was nothing he had seen before. The figure slowly turned its head and stared into the light, its 2 large, round, glassy, lidless eyes shining brightly like 2 orange marbles. Its watermelon-shaped head, resting at the top of a thin neck, was fully the size of the rest of the body. Except for its oversized head, the creature was thin, with long, spindly arms and legs and large hands and feet. The skin was hairless and peach-colored and appeared to have a rough texture, like wet sandpaper, Bill subsequently told cryptozoologist Loren Coleman. The figure, which stood no more than 3.5 to 4 feet tall, was shaped like a baby's body, with long arms and legs. It had been making its way uncertainly along the wall, its long fingers curling around the rocks when the car lights surprised it. Unfortunately, neither of Bill's companions saw the creature. Mike was watching his own side of the road, and Andy was sitting in back talking with him. The sighting lasted only a few seconds, and before Bill could speak, he had already passed the scene. Mike and Andy told Coleman, however, that their friend was pretty scared and sounded genuinely frightened. At first, they were skeptical, but Bill's obvious fear forced them to change their minds. I really flew after I saw it, Bill said. I took that corner at 45, which is pretty fast. I said to my friends, "Did you see that?" And they said, "No, describe it." I did, and they said, "Go back, go back." And I said, "No way, no way." When you see something like that, you don't want to stand around and see what it's going to do. They finally got me to go back, and Mike was leaning out of the window yelling, "Come on, creature." And as I was saying, "Will you cut that out?" Andy was yelling, "I want to see you." But the creature was gone. Bill dropped his friends off and went home. He was visibly upset as he walked through the door, and his father asked him what was wrong. Young Bartlett related the story, then withdrew to sketch what he had seen. Next segment is called Who Is That? In the meantime, another teenager was about to see the creature. Around midnight, John Baxter, 15, left his girlfriend Kathy Cronin's house at the south end of Miller's High Road in Dover and started walking up the street on his way home. Half an hour later, after he had walked about a mile, he observed someone approaching him. Because the figure was quite short, John assumed it was an acquaintance of his, M.G. Beauchard, who lived on the street, and so John called out, "M.G., is that you?" There was no response, but John and the figure continued to approach each other until finally the latter stopped. John then halted as well and asked, "Who is that?" The sky was dark and overcast, and he could only see a shadowy form. Trying to get a better look, he took one step forward, and the figure scurried off to the left, running down a shallow wooded gully and then up on the opposite bank. As it ran, John could hear its footfalls on the dry leaves. He followed that thing down the slope, then stopped and looked across the gully. The creature, for now John could see what it was, stood in silhouette about 30 feet away, its feet molded around the top of a rock several feet from a tree. It was leaning towards a tree and had the long fingers of both hands entwined around that trunk, which was 8 inches in diameter, as if it was for support. The creature's body reminded John of a monkey's, except for its dark, figure-8 shaped head. Its eyes, 2 lighter spots in the middle of its head, were looking straight at John, who after a few minutes began to feel decidedly uneasy. Realizing that he never seen or heard of such a creature before, and fearing what it might do next, he backed carefully up the slope, his heart pounding, and then walked very fast down to the road to the intersection at Farm Street. There, a couple passing in a car picked him up and then drove him home. The next day, Bill Bartlett told his close friend, Will Tanner, 18, of his sighting, and that night, around midnight, Tanner himself would catch a fleeting glimpse of the creature. Next segment is called A Third Sighting. Will was driving Abby Brabham, 15, home when that encounter took place. As they passed along Springdale Avenue, Abby spotted something in the headlights on the left side of the road. The something was a creature crouched on all fours and facing the car. Its body was thin and monkey-like, but its head was large and oblong with no nose, ears, or mouth. The thing was hairless and its skin was tan or beige in color. The facial area around the eyes was lighter and the eyes glowed green. Abby insisted this was the case, even after investigators told her that Bill Bartlett had said that the eyes were orange. Will saw the creature only momentarily and had the impression of something with a large head and tan body with its front legs up in the air. He didn't know what it was, but he did know that it was not a dog. Frightened, Abby urged him to speed up so that they could get away. Will claims that only after they left the scene did he recall Bill's sighting. His own had been so brief and unspectacular that he probably would have thought little of it if Abby had not been with him. He asked her to describe the figure, deliberately phrasing misleading questions about aspects of the creature's appearance he knew not to be true in order to check her story against Bartlett's, which he did not mention to her, but Abby stuck to her story. On April 28th, Lauren Coleman, then living in nearby Needham, was visiting the Dover Country Store when a store employee, Melanie Fryer, told him about Bill Bartlett's sighting and sketch. She promised to get him a copy and 2 days later provided him with 2 drawings. The next day, Coleman interviewed Bartlett. On May 3rd, he questioned Baxter and Brabham, and on May 5th, he talks with Tanner. 2 weeks later, Coleman pulled in Walter Webb of Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, Joseph Nyman of the Mutual UFO Network, and Ed Fogg of the New England UFO Study Group to join the investigation. Although none of the witnesses had reported seeing a UFO in connection with the Dover demon, the ufologists were struck by the creature's apparent resemblance to humanoid beings sometimes associated with UFOs. Next segment is called Honest Witnesses. The investigators interviewed the witnesses' parents, who said they believed the stories. The Bartletts said their son is very honest and open, and not the kind of person who enjoys playing pranks. Mrs. Baxter remarked that her son never made up stories, meaning apparently that he never made up stories which he passed off as true. His father told a reporter that his son writes science fiction, but he still didn't question John's honesty. John confirmed that he is a science fiction enthusiast, but insisted that had nothing to do with his report. Will Tanner's father and mother both accepted his story. The father believed Will and Abby had mistaken a conventional animal for the creature. The mother, on the other hand, felt they had been genuinely unknown. They had seen something genuinely unknown. Alice Stewart, who owned the land closest to the spot where John Baxter allegedly saw the demon, said that she had not seen or heard anything unusual that night. Her dogs, which were inside at the time of the reported encounter, had not acted up. Dover Police Chief Carl Sheridan spoke highly of young Bartlett and described him as a reliable witness. High school principal Richard Wakely told Coleman, "I don't think these kids got together and invented it. They were not troublemakers, just average students." A police officer said, "At first, I was going to ask one of the witnesses to give me whatever it was he was smoking, but I know all 4, and I know that to all of us, they're all very reputable people." On April 25th, 4 days after that first sighting, Robert Linton, science instructor at Dover-Sherburne Regional High School, overheard Bill Bartlett discussing the encounter with classmates. Later, Linton asked him about it, and the youth provided a full account and drew a picture of the thing. Bartlett is an accomplished artist and a member of Boston's Copley Art Society. Linton, who said Bill had told him the experience scared the hell out of him, accepted the story because of the young man's good reputation. The researchers were especially impressed with Bartlett and with Abby Brabham, who declared adamantly, "I know I saw the creature and don't care what happens." Next segment is Not a Hoax. Is the Dover demon a hoax? The investigators concluded that was possible, but doubted that this was the explanation. There was nothing in the witnesses' backgrounds to suggest they might be pranksters, and much to suggest that they were honest, upright individuals. As Webb observes, none of the 4 was on drugs or drinking at the time of his or her sighting, so far as we were able to determine. None of the principals in this affair made any attempt to go to the newspapers or police to publicize their claims. Instead, the sightings gradually leaked out. Finally, the teenagers' own parents, the high school principal, the science instructor, and other adults in Dover whose comments were solicited, didn't believe the Dover demon was a fabrication, implying the youths did indeed see something. As for the idea the witnesses were victims of somebody else's stunt, this seems most unlikely, chiefly due to the virtual impossibility of creating an animated, lifelike demon of the sort described. But if the demon is real, what is it? A UFO being? Perhaps, but then nothing precisely similar has ever been reported before, according to Ted Blocher, who has collected over 1,500 UFO occupant accounts for the Center of UFO Studies. On the other hand, maybe the demon is a member of a curious race known to the Cree Indians of eastern Canada as the Monongeshi. The Monongeshi, naturalist Sigurd Olsen says in his book Listening Post, are supposed to be little people with round heads and no noses who live with only one purpose, to play jokes on travelers. The little creatures have long, spidery legs, arms with 6-fingered hands, and live between rocks in the rapids. And then that's it. That's everything. That finally wraps up chapter 1. In this case, the chapter associated with the Dover demon is an unsolved mystery. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. For starters, I remember some of the details of my original video. I remember that ride that the boys were having, Bill, Mike, and Andy, and how they saw them for just a fleeting second. Amazing, right? How 1 second can basically just change someone's life. There they were, just nonchalantly driving at 10:30 in the evening, and then all of a sudden Bill saw that creature over to the left, and then that was it. They didn't see it afterward, but it was enough for him to be able to describe it and then draw it afterward. I think his drawing is one of the most famous cryptid drawings of all too. It's just because of the way the creature looks. It's a very iconic look when it comes to a cryptid, almost like a universal type of characteristics that are tied to it. I don't remember though some of the other sightings, so some of the stuff is new. Like some of the other people that encountered the creatures, such as John Baxter. I don't remember his on his end, and nor do I remember Abby Brabham as well with regards to her encounter. So it's nice to be able to share those here as well. What's interesting is that all of them, and this is why the Dover Demon story still remains so beloved, is the fact that so many people saw it within such a short period, and they all universally described the same thing. It was a creature that was small, had a monkey or baby-like body, but then it had long legs, long arms, then it had long fingers as well, then it had that bulbous head, and then it had those giant eyes as well. All of them described it. So it was fascinating whenever that cop was, or the sheriff was trying to trick, in this case, Abby, by asking her questions that knew it would throw her off if she was lying. But no, she stuck to her story. And then that's why the witnesses are considered all honest. That's another interesting thing, too, is you have so many of these witnesses, and then so many of the people that knew them, from family members to friends to schoolmates to workers and so on. Like, they knew them, and they all gave them credible passes. All of them declared them to be honest. All of them stated that they wouldn't make things up, and they certainly weren't doing it for fame or publicity, because they didn't seek out like newspapers or magazines or stuff involving the press. No, they just simply had it told whenever they were asked. And so it's fascinating stuff to this day. And then it ends by asking if it's a hoax or not. Is it something involving UFOs? There's always that angle too, but nobody reported really any UFO sightings around that area. So who knows? But I don't think it's a hoax. I think this is one of the most truest cryptid encounters out there. And so that's why it remains so beloved. But let me know what you guys think. Post it in the comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.